Good morning. Welcome to Virtual Breakfast on August 8th, 2024. My name is Teresa Crook, and I'm a field crops educator located here at the Saginaw Valley Research and Education Center. This morning, we have Erin Hill, weed science diagnostician for the MSU Plant and Pest Diagnostic Lab with us. So good morning. Dr. Hill's topic this morning is tips to improve your grainy photos. She will share her experience and provide strategies to improve your photos along with uploading solutions. Dr. Hill.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me. As I was just introduced, my name is Erin Hill, and I work in the diagnostic lab on campus. And hopefully all of you or many of you are familiar with the diagnostic lab that we have on campus. We are a group of plant detectives. There are 6 full-time people that work in the lab, and we each specialize in one of the plant pest disciplines. So we have people who work on plant pathogens, the person who works on nematodes, molecular diagnostic tools, kind of pushing us into the future. We have a brand new entomologist, Sarah Hewson, and then I am the weed scientist, and I handle plant identification with our nematologist, Angie Tenney, and also work on anything abiotic. So what does that mean? It means if it doesn't fall into one of those other categories I already mentioned, there's a good chance it's coming to me. So these are things like nutrient deficiencies, weather-related issues, mechanical injury, chemical injury, things like that. The other thing I'm responsible for is the herbicide resistance screening of weeds in the entire state. So people send me seeds around August through October, and I do that screening throughout the winter to keep up on any weed resistance issues that we have in the state. So when I was asked to do this talk, it was about, well, what's a good diagnostic related topic to talk about? And so I thought about that, and something that I struggle with, our lab struggles with a little bit in diagnostics, is getting photos from people. So this is my experience in the diagnostic lab, and that I've heard from my extension colleagues and other people who work in agribusiness, is that we sometimes get a little bit frustrated with receiving photos. Now, in my case, I'm usually looking for photos that accompany a physical sample, but the things I'm going to talk about would be helpful, I hope, to you as you use photos to communicate with any of the ag professionals that you encounter. So this is a little cartoon that I came up with a while ago, kind of a spoof on if you give a mouse a cookie, that if you give a diagnostician a sample, they're going to ask for on-site photos to go with it. Guarantee that that's going to happen, especially if it ends up being something abiotic. So why photos? Photos always make the job of diagnosing a problem easier. They can never hurt the situation to have photos. Ag professionals, ourselves included, do not have software to improve the quality of your photos. So if it looks blurry on your phone, it's going to look blurry on my computer monitor as well. When you send photos that accompany a sample, this is going to speed up the time in which you get a sample or an answer in most cases, because it cuts down on me having to come back and ask you for a picture. So if you send it from the get-go, we're already one step ahead to getting you an answer to your question about plant health. And then also, if we have multiple quality photos, sometimes that can help increase the accuracy of the answer that we can provide for you. So here are some examples of some of the types of photos that, when we do get them, are a bit frustrating. You can see that sometimes they're blurry. We have a bunch of plant material that's dried all stacked up on top of it itself. We have a photo of a phone with a blurry picture of a spider on it. All we can tell you, all Sarah can tell you, is that that is a spider. She can't tell you anything else. And then we also have a blurry picture of a grass here that was sent for ID. So this spring, I wrote an article kind of related to this, really specific to grass ID, because that can be very challenging. And so I had some specific things for that. So first, I wanted to talk about, when you're thinking about taking photos to send to whomever it is, what types of photos are helpful? Well, in our case, usually the plants have some kind of problem. And so it's helpful to send pictures of the symptoms at a close-up view. So here we have a picture of a tomato leaf. This person took a picture of the front of the leaf and the underside of the leaf and sent those. When we're getting a sample, even though we have the sample to look at, sometimes things happen during transport. And so having it as fresh as possible after you've pulled it from the field is still sometimes helpful. So include those close-up photos. Now, one thing we also get sometimes is bags of leaves. And bags of leaves are helpful if we're trying to isolate pathogens, but bags of leaves are not helpful if we're trying to understand the distribution of those symptoms on the plant. So this is where maybe you can't send a whole sugar beet. You should be able to, but maybe let's say you can't send a whole sugar beet. If you are able to send us this bag of leaves, it's very helpful to also send some photos of the plants in the field so we can look at the distribution of those. Is it just the new leaves that are impacted? Is it just the old leaves that are impacted? Are they on one side of the plant or the other? All of these things are part of this puzzle that we're trying to put together, and just a bag of loose leaves doesn't give us that information. This is especially important for trees. I realize this is the field crops talk, but that doesn't mean you're never going to send a tree in or ask questions about a tree. Obviously, most of the time we don't get trees. We can accept trees, so don't be afraid to send them. We have that capacity, but most of the time you are not going to send us a full-grown mature maple tree. So sending us branches and then sending photos of what the tree looks like are very helpful. The other thing you should think about is showing us your roots. So you might be showing us pictures of the whole plant, but go ahead and dig that plant up so we can look at the root to determine if maybe there are some root rot issues that we're not going to be able to detect with just foliage. Again, ideally, when you're submitting something to the diagnostic lab, you would submit a whole plant if possible. But if you can't, showing us the roots is helpful. And it's also helpful for ID. We do a lot of identification through photos, and so it's helpful there. Landscape pictures are very helpful. Teresa, can you still hear me? I see that my video is acting slow. Okay, thank you. So landscape photos are really important because they tell us the story. We are not able to teleport to your site and look at the field. And with the quantity of samples that we get every year, we're not able to go do on-site visits. So those landscape pictures are very helpful. They can show us a variety of things. So landscape photos. So here we have a plant that was sent to the lab, and it's a corn plant, but it doesn't tell us anything about what's going on in the whole field. So when I wrote back to this client and asked for these photos, now I can see the distribution of the symptoms in the field. I can look at other plants like the weeds that are on the right-hand side and the close-up of the corn row, and I see that they are all dead. I can look and see that this is a sandy soil. I can also see that there's a tree line right there. And so all of these things, again, are pieces to the puzzle that we're trying to solve. Here are some other examples where knowing the landscape is helpful. We have an asparagus field on the bottom. You can see here that there's only one pass that is impacted. On the top, we can see a greenhouse. And if somebody is asking for weed control recommendations, it's really important to know what the surrounding area consists of. The other thing that's helpful, if you have both plants with symptoms and plants that appear healthy, is to send photos of those side by side. So when you tell us that the wheat is stunted, like what we see down here on the bottom, we can visually see how stunted it is. Again, if you're sending in a physical sample, it's really nice for you to send us healthy and symptomatic plants, but sending a picture of those is kind of very nice and helpful. You get bonus points if you send us pictures that are enhanced using your digital technology. So here we can see this is more of a residential sample, but they're trying to show us in their yard where this maple branch is, where it came from. And then in this case, we can see that there's a pool nearby. And sometimes that is important in diagnosing these types of residential problems. So sometimes when we're trying to identify things, be it plants or insects in particular, detailed photos are very important. And if you're sending us the specimen, then we may not need these, but if you're trying to ask us for help over email, or you're sending things in through Ask Extension or through your educator or your seed dealer, these detailed photos are helpful in this case. One of the most important things is that you stay in focus. So these photos just came to our lab 2 days ago, and there was a progression of emails in which they came, and they were looking for insect ID. And it started out with this very blurry blob. And you can see, hopefully, if you're able to safely look at your screen, that the clarity of the picture improves. So again, as I mentioned earlier, we don't have any special software like a CSI episode to make your bad pictures look better. So if you can't see it, we can't see it. If you're having trouble getting the small details to show up or focus on your phone camera, this is the time when it's okay to stick your finger in the photo. So when you're taking your family photo, you don't want to have your finger sticking out there. My mom does that all the time. It's like the family and then there's a piece of your finger. But when you're trying to get it to focus, that gives your camera something larger to focus on, and it can help it differentiate between the background and what you're actually trying to show. So go ahead and put your hand in the photo, and that will help it get a clear picture. Consider the background that you're using. Using a contrasting background is going to help us when we're trying to zoom in and look at the details. So here you can see a picture of Bermuda grass that I just held up with the lawn in the background versus putting it on a black background. Now, I don't know about you, but most of us don't carry professional photography supplies in our truck, right? But there's lots of other options out there. So I'm trying to show you that here. One of my favorites is if the sky is clear, to hold it up against the clear blue sky. Blue jeans are a great background for plants, for things that are small. Truck beds are good. If you have dark paint, the hood of the truck can be good. Even a sidewalk can be a contrasting background. So you don't have to carry anything special around. Just try to use what you have that's going to set off, especially those green colors. For grass ID, there are some things that we need in particular. Grasses are very challenging to ID. They are also very challenging for our plant ID apps to identify. And so that's why we do get a lot of grass pictures. And there are specific structures that we need to see to identify grasses. One of those is around the collar region, the ligule. So if you can get a clear picture of this, that is very helpful. If you're not sure what to get pictures of for grass ID, we do have that article. I'll put a link in the chat later. The other thing for grass is if there are any other specialized things that you notice that set it apart, those are helpful to take care of. So in my hand on the right-hand side, we have the hairy leaves of a giant foxtail, which is one of the characteristics that sets it apart from the other foxtail species. On the left-hand side, you can see the seed head. Probably you're not waiting until it's seeding to get an ID, but if we have to key something out for a grass, it's always asking for the seed head. So if there are flowers or seed heads, include those pictures. Now, I asked our entomologist, Dr. Sarah Hewson, for some issues with insect and arthropod ID photos, since this is her area. And these are the things that she said to pass on, again, emphasizing that focus is important and that lighting is really key to getting clarity in your photos. So you can see here, again, some photos that are out of focus. Adjusting the lights are helpful. And perhaps outside you're not able to do this. Maybe you do need to bring it inside so you can adjust the light. Zooming in, and this photo here on the right, there's a whole big picture of, I don't know what that is, maybe a pole. And then they're asking for the ID of this very tiny mite here at the end of the arrow. So zooming in is going to help because as we zoom in on this photo, it's going to become very pixelated and it's not going to be helpful. Providing something as a size reference. This can be helpful with plants too, but probably more so with insects and other arthropods. You can see here this really nice photo on the top right where somebody put a quarter in the photo. And then the person actually wrote the approximate size of this beetle on the left-hand side. Other things you can use, depending on what the specimen is pens, other coins, anything you can think of that would be general to give us some kind of size reference. So you have your photos and you're ready to share them. And sometimes this is a bit of a struggle. When you're sharing them, sometimes your email or your phone will give you the option for different size of photos to send. So here I'm trying to show you a photo to give you an example of what happens if you send the actual size, which should be the largest file size versus the smaller size. So this is the landscape photo, and I'm not going to zoom in on a plant here. I'm going to zoom in on that structure in the back. And you can see if I send the low resolution photo, the smallest one from my iPhone, and I try to zoom in on that versus sending the actual size, you can't make out any details in that low resolution photo. So if we're trying to look at weeds or other things in the picture, it's not going to be very helpful if when your picture comes through, it's the size of a postage stamp or a thumbnail. On the Android phones, it will send the highest file size that you took automatically. At least that's my understanding. But on the iPhones, it seems to be that's where we have the biggest problem. And that's because it gives everybody an option. And they think, well, sending a smaller picture is better. It doesn't clog up this person's email. And while that is true, it doesn't clog up our email. It's not helpful. So this is an example, again, of two photos of a grass with a split stem. And you can see what happens when we try to zoom in on the one on the left that was sent at the small resolution versus the actual size on the right. On the right, you can make out all this undifferentiated tissue, and you just see blurry blob on the left. The other thing you can do, you would need to do this before you took your photos, is check what resolution your smartphone is set to take photos and set it to the highest resolution. Now, yes, this will take up space on your phone, so you might not want to do it all the time. Sometimes the highest resolution is the default. Usually it's in the middle or the high end, it's not at the low end. There are different ways to do this for all different kinds of phones. On my iPhone 13, there is not an option to change this. On iPhones 14 Pro and 15, all models, there is an option to do this right within the camera. And then there's options to do this on most Android phones, but it's different based on phone model. And we don't have 5 hours to go through all those that are available. So if you want to check, just Google your phone model, how to change picture resolution. And usually in 3 or 4 steps, you can look and see what size pictures you're taking and determine if you need to change it. If you're sending a lot of photos and you're sending those high resolution photos, this can be a problem for email. And think that MSU has either a 20 or a 40 megabyte limit on how much can be sent in one email and received. So what is helpful is to use the cloud to share those multiple photos with us. There are lots of cloud options, and all of them will create a link that you can send via email or text to your ag professional. One of the most common ones that we get is Google Photos or Google Drive. And I have an example here of what that looks like when I received the link. Yesterday, I got a really nice one. I had a residential client who wanted ID of 4 turf grass species in their lawn. And they had 4 separate folders. Each had about 5 to 7 photos with all the different close-ups and things that I had asked for. And it was really nicely organized and a great way for me to write back and say, grass 1 is this, grass 2 is this, and so on. And that was really helpful. This is a pretty easy process, but again, there's all these different file sharing sites that use the cloud. So Dropbox is another, Apple Share, SharePoint, OneDrive, whatever one you're most comfortable with, you can go with that. We should be able to access it. If you're not sure, there are a lot of YouTube videos that within 2 minutes will show you how to do this. Again, it's usually a 3 or 4 step process. You have that link and you can use that link via email or text message. The reason I've been talking about email so much is that the diagnostic lab is not able to accept text messages because we have landlines. And so doesn't do any good for you to try and text us a photo. We do have that problem sometimes where people would like to text us a photo. All you need to do is when you're trying to send that photo, instead of putting a phone number in, put an email address, and that'll come through to us via email if you're trying to send an individual photo. And that is what I have about how to improve your grainy photos. So I am going to stop sharing so we can go back to Phil and Teresa for the credit. Thank you.
All righty. So thank you, everyone. Fantastic job. I learned a lot. Thank you, Dr. Hill. Some of the questions that we can go through in the chat. There was a person that did upload your grass identification link Dr. Hill. So that would have gone out to everyone. So they have that out there. In
Thanks.
addition, there's some additional questions that we can go through. So the first one actually is for Dr. Andreessen. And will Hurricane Debbie cause us to stay in this nice weather pattern longer than normal?
And the answer to that is directly, it won't make much of a difference. But as you're probably aware, Hurricane Debbie is still making landfall here in the Carolinas and is going to cause a lot of problems here for the next several days. But it will be for the Mid-Atlantic and New England. It's moving into the mid latitudes, and it will stay east and south of Michigan. So really not much. It is linked indirectly, though, to the upper air pattern that I talked about in the steering of that. So it is technically connected, but we won't see any impacts. So that's the long and short of it. But if you are traveling or if you have family out in the east, this is going to be a big deal for the next several days. Several inches of rain, heavy rain, flooding problems are expected all along the East Coast. So if you've got to travel that way, give yourself some time and keep a close eye on things there.
All righty, thank you. Dr. Hill, there was a couple questions for you in the chat. If you have a slow internet and you see the squirrel running and running and running when you're trying to upload a photo, do you have any suggestions? Some of us in the rural areas don't have as fast internet, even to upload into the cloud. So is there any additional comments that you could make along those lines?
Yeah, I don't know that I have any great solutions to that problem, except that if you go into town and there's somewhere that might have faster internet, to try it there. You're always welcome to print and send photos. If you're actually submitting a sample, we do get a fair number of those that are printed on the computer. So that's another option too. If you're not able to upload them, you could also send them on a USB drive or something like that. So it won't be any faster, but there are some other traditional methods that you could use to get us those photos.
The other one had to do more with your question about the specific type of iPhones. I think that your focus more was on the high resolution, however iPhone brand or whatever your preferences are. Is that kind of correct, that you prefer to have just high resolution photos?
Yeah, I'm not saying that you need to go out and get a new phone or a new camera. I'm saying that the newer ones have easier ways on the iPhone to adjust the resolution of your photos. But it's fine. If you have the 13 or lower, just send us the best that you can. And those are still, think about how far cameras have come and technology has come in the last decade. We are light years ahead of where we used to be, right? That's why this topic is important. We all have the technology, and we just need to start remembering that that's really, really helpful in solving these kinds of problems.
Okay, thank you. Another quick question is can you give us a brief rundown or breakdown of what services you provide through the diagnostic lab and what you charge for them?
Sure. So the services we provide, we're kind of like, I tell students, we're like plant urgent care, right? So a lot of times people send us plants and they're not performing as expected, and we triage those samples with our group of experts. And every year we get about 450 different species of plants to look at. So we are looking at every kind of plant you can imagine. And when they come in and we triage it, we determine, okay, this looks like a disease. We're going to follow that path. This looks like a nematode or an insect issue. We're going to follow that path. And we go through, and sometimes there are multiple of us that work on it. Sometimes we need to reach out to our other campus experts. So if we have a particular crop or a blueberry or a greenhouse problem, MSU has so many plant scientists that it's really great, and we're well connected with all of those, and they help us, and sometimes we help them too because they bring us their problems. The base fee for a sample coming into the lab for plant health is $20 for in-state, $40 for out-of-state. That price can increase depending on what needs to be done. So certain virus testing or molecular work will cost more. And those prices are listed on our website. We don't necessarily know ahead of time what types of tests that we're going to need to do. If it's something where the cost is significant, like we need to send it out for special virus testing, then we contact the client ahead of time and say, this is our option. Are you on board with doing that? We also can send samples out for tissue nutrient analysis. We work with ANL, Great Lakes Laboratories. And so we usually communicate that too, depending on the situation, to make sure that people are on board with that. For identification purposes, if we're getting plants and insects in, that's a $10 fee for in-state, $20 for out-of-state. For herbicide resistance, if it's not part of the soybean program, which covers specific weed species, then it is $90 for in-state, $80 for out-of-state, and so on. I'm not very well versed in the soybean, or in the nematode pricing, but all of that is listed on our website. So we try to offer a wide array of services, and we increase the number of services and things we're able to screen for all the time.
All righty. Well, thank you. If Dr. Chalvez is on, I'd like to have him give a white mold update, if that's possible.
Good morning. Yeah, thanks for the time. So, yeah, just really quick, I've been getting quite a few questions now that white mold disease is actually visible in our soybean plants. People are now considering or wondering if they can go back and make a fungicide application, but it's too late now. So I think what is really confusing for people is that disease is going to appear to develop from now through September, but the damage is already done. The fungicide applications, if you're going to make them, need to be made from beginning of flowering at R1 through to beginning of pod at R3. So you can certainly spray as long as it's on label, but you're going to be wasting your money once we go beyond those growth stages. And as to the question of, well, there's still flowers there, will I still get infection? Maybe some, but I don't think so, because I think most of the flowers tend to be in the top part of the plant. Where most of the white mold damage comes from is when we get infection of that main stem down low, because that's going to kill the entire plant and you're going to lose all of those seed above. And that, again, is happening between that R1 and R3 growth stage. So I think it's just sort of a bit of a hard concept to sort of understand. You don't see disease, the end of July, the start of August, but then it starts to develop, so I should go spray. No, you've got to be right on that. You have to spray during flowering. So I've had a few different inquiries about that, so I thought I'd just cover that. The other thing, in general, tar spot has been much slower, thankfully, this year than maybe we first were a little bit concerned, because some of the first early reports and a lot of rain. There are some fields now where I would consider we're probably up above threshold, and maybe a fungicide could be applied. We have updated the tar spot map to try and get you to think a little bit about fungicide application timing and when that's most likely to be profitable. So you can have a look at that. But typically through to probably the R3, maybe the R4 growth stage, if disease is on an upswing, there may still be some benefit spraying that late. We certainly, again, don't want to be driving past the field and seeing it from the truck. Then it's really too late. So I guess I just urge people to get back out into their fields and just be aware of what's going on out there. So that's my update. Thanks.
Thank you. Are
Erin,
there any other specialists?
I have a question for Erin. I'm sorry, Teresa. Erin, many times I'll get a call asking for us to identify a certain type of chemistry in a plant and some challenges that the plant has gone through. So is our lab able to check for a certain herbicide in a plant that may have caused damage in a field?
So this is a great question that I get regularly. Our lab on campus is not able to do that extraction and chemical residue identification process. It takes a chemistry lab to do that, and we don't have the setup for that. We do curate a list of labs that can do residue testing on soil, plant tissue, water, other materials. And so I have that available. I update it every other year, and I can send that to people who are interested. What our lab can do is look at the situation and tell you that it looks like a particular type of herbicide. If we know information about what was applied in the area or to that field directly, we can give you our best educated guess about what happened, but we don't have the capacity to give you a test that said, yes, this tested positive for atrazine residue. Usually, I'd like to have people contact me directly because I want to see what information you're trying to get out of this residue testing. Residue testing is going to come back. It's costly. First of all, it's usually $100 to $200 per sample if you know what you're looking for, and it can be more expensive if you don't know what you're looking for. And then I kind of like to provide a mini counseling session, if you will, about what to expect with those results. They're going to come back with information in parts per billion or parts per million of particular chemistries. And if there is no reference for what would be causing plant injury, or if there is no reference for what would be a maximum residue level and make it safe to eat or consume, then you might not be getting the information that you really want. And the reason there aren't published data for that is because the breakdown of herbicides over time and what levels can cause injury is very much impacted by the environment, the soil, the rate, all of those things. So there's not a book we can go to and say, okay, this soil has, this particular kind of soil has this level in most cases. So if somebody is interested in that, I always ask them to contact the lab and say, can you give me the threshold level that I'm looking for? It is good at giving you presence absence data. That doesn't always mean it's at a level that would cause injury, if that makes sense.
That's a great answer. Thank you.
Mhm.
Anything else, Phil, that you had, or I have a couple other comments or?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay. I wanted to put a plug in from Monica Jean that says at Agro Expo, the MSU Extension booth will have free magnifying lenses for your phone. And so I'm assuming that Dr. Hill knows what those are. They're a little contraption you put on the back of your phone that actually magnifies it. And do these help, Dr. Hill?
Yes, they do help if you keep your phone steady. That's the thing is I have one I got pretty cheap on Amazon. It's basically a rubber band with a little lens bubble.
Mhm.
Now with our phones that have multiple lenses, you have to figure out which one it goes on. But that's usually, 50-50 or 33% chance you'll get it the first time. And then you have to practice holding it very still and then zooming in. But they can be very helpful, especially all of those photos I showed you of the grass ligules were taken on my phone with that lens on there.
All righty. Are there any other specialists that want to make any comments this morning?
This is Chris here. The fall armyworm is making its way south to north. It's a tropical species. We don't usually get it up here, but if you recall, maybe 5-6 years ago, we had a flight of fall armyworm come in very late, like September, and it wasn't on corn. It was in grassy crops. It was eating cover crops, lawns, and alfalfa stands and that sort of thing. So I put a couple traps out. My Ohio State has 14 traps out. So if you can get the Ohio newsletter, I think it's called Ohio Corn or whatever, they should be giving that sort of telling us what those numbers are as they move forward. So when they do come in, it's quite late. It's not a corn problem typically. But those of you who plant cover crops and this sort of thing, we'll see if we get another flight of this insect.
All righty. Thank you, Dr. DeFonso. Is there anyone else that would like to, a specialist that would like to chime in? If not, I'd put a little plug-in into the chat for everyone. I put the research farm, the field day here at the Saginaw Valley Research and Extension Center is the 20th of August. And the link is in the chat as if you want to do registration there. So without further ado, if there's nothing else, we will hope everyone can go back to their day. Thank you all for attending. You can see or visit our website. You can see us through Spotify and the Apple Podcast, or you can follow us on Facebook. So thank you everyone for attending today. Thank you, Dr. Hill and Dr. Van Driesen. And we will get you back to enjoy this beautiful weather. Thank you.